special education, inclusion, integration, mainstream. There are so many terms that are used when we talk about teaching children who learn differently. But at the end of the day, it's very simple. There's only one group, children. Everything else is just a matter of logistics. If I cannot learn the way you teach, then please teach me the way that I can learn. At the end of the day, that's all that it boils down to. Every child learns differently, and if, as teachers, we are well planned and we teach in what is known as a multisensorial learning and teaching method, then every child in the classroom is able to learn at their pace. At a very simple level, I just want to put a thought out there. We often hear he's dyslexic, she's autistic, he's dysgraphic. Let's take a child X. The child X wears spectacles, he loves maths, he loves music, he's a very talented basketball player, and he also has dyslexia. Dyslexia is just one part of what makes up that child X. It doesn't define him. I think when we look at it this way, then we look at child X very, very differently. We look at him as a child with so many different talents and needs and abilities, and one of them happens to be dyslexia, for which the teaching may need to be adapted. Often when we say the child X is dyslexic, it's almost as if he's been put into a box, dyslexia, and then he kind of fits into whatever, measurements that box is and whatever characterizes that box. So if you have child X and child A and child B, all with dyslexia inside that box, it's almost as if they're all the same. They're dyslexic and there they sit in that box. So I think this kind of makes the point that I was trying to put out there a little clearer. So maybe that's something that, we all can think about. So let's take another simple example. In homes, we have family members with different needs. Often one member likes to eat a certain food, another member may have diabetes, so she cannot eat something. A third person may be slightly elderly, so needs more bland food. So as homemakers, or what is it that we do? It is not that we cook separately for each person, right? What we do is we have a basic meal and then we tweak that meal a little bit. So maybe for the older person we serve an extra, bland boiled vegetables. For the person with diabetes, maybe we remove the dessert or the sweet dish and put in a sugar substitute there. I'm just giving very, very simple examples. So similarly, in a classroom where there are children with different learning needs, it's not as if you have to make different lesson plans for each child. You have a basic lesson plan in place, and then when you implement that lesson plan, and maybe when you set an assignment, or maybe when you're testing, you just set that assignment differently or you test differently. So maybe for a child with learning difficulties, maybe you give extra time on the test, or maybe you have a reader who can read out the test if that's the difficulty for the child. Maybe when you are assigning work for the student with dyslexia, you just use a different you just use a different font on the worksheet, and you use a better spacing on the worksheet. And maybe for a student with autism, when you are teaching in the classroom, you just make sure that the student is in a space where there isn't so much disturbance and a lot of movement happening, which will take away his attention or distract him. So all of these needs can be accommodated very easily in a mainstream classroom with just some special adaptations which a special educator might be able to help you with, or you can look up and read up and then adapt the lesson or the class. Let's go back to that basic premise. There's just one group children, everything else is logistics. Now, while we've simplified it, that doesn't take away from the fact that there are certain conditions for which certain specific guidance is required. Now, when we have a person with asthma and we say the person is asthmatic in the family, is it that the person does not participate in any of the family picnics or activities? No, all he does is maybe carry an inhaler along, or maybe if the trek is very long and very steep, then maybe, he just goes a little slower or he sits it out, right? So if that label that we use, asthmatic, is used only to define the difficulty and to help us understand what is the special care that needs to be taken, then that's fine. But if I'm going to use that label asthmatic to label the family member and to kind of discriminate against him or her and say that he's asthmatic, so he can't be part of any family activity. He's asthmatic, so he's going to need a lot of extra care. He can't come on the trip. Then that's where the problem lies. So as long as we use the labels of autism, dyslexia, dysgraphia, attention deficit disorder, if all of these are used to just help us identify the difficulty or the challenge that the student is having and helps us to understand where the intervention is required, then we're good to go. If you'd like to know a little more, if you'd like to seek out some guidance or help, please don't hesitate to get in touch.